My name is Gary Smith. I'm the founder of a company called Gary L. Smith, LLC. I've been in business for 22 years, and I work as a business consultant, business and personal coach, professional speaker, and author. But I've really narrowed my focus in this last year into exactly what we're going to be talking about today, and that is the power of purpose. My mission going forward is really helping people to live more fulfilled lives and more successful lives by discovering and answering one important question, and that is, why are you here and what are you doing about it? I think we all have two purposes in life. We have a general purpose. I think we weren't just created to occupy space and suck up oxygen. We're here for reasons. And I think part of it from a general perspective is that we're here to make the world a better place and to make a contribution to the lives of those that we love and to our spheres of influence. But I also think that we each have a very specific purpose. And the specific purpose is looking at how do we take the unique skills and gifts and personalities and apply it to our own spheres of influence in order to be able to help people be more successful. The thing I want to talk about today, we're going to talk specifically about purpose, but I also think it's important to understand that purpose does not exist in isolation. So we're actually going to talk about three key words that you may want to make note of. The first word is purpose, the second word is needs, and the third is beliefs. So we're going to touch on all of those, and I will warn you in advance, it's going to be sort of like trying to drink from a fire hose. So I'm going to give you a lot of information, and some of it initially may seem a little bit disjointed, but I promise I'll pull it all together before we get to the end, so it'll make sense in the end. We make hundreds, if not thousands, of choices every day, and most of the choices that we make, we're not aware of. But choices cause us to take action. The actions that we take produce a result, and the result has some sort of impact. Now, sometimes that impact is on us, and sometimes the impact is on us and others. So I get up this morning and I come down to have breakfast, and I have the choice between having a heart-healthy bowl of oatmeal or eating a leftover Boston cream donut from last night. If I choose to eat the donut, the action I take is eating the donut. But if I do that, if I make that choice and I take that action on a consistent basis, the result that I'm going to produce is I'm going to gain weight. I'm going to get fat. And the impact of that is that it's going to affect my health. It's going to affect my energy. And depending on how severely it impacts my health, it's not only going to hurt me, but it's potentially going to hurt my family too. The challenge here is that this model is not complete. And in the end, I'm going to tie it back and complete it. But what happens is that when we produce results that we don't like, or we have an impact that we don't really want, we tend to go back and try to change our choices. And changing our choices can help a little bit, but it's not the ultimate answer to the question. So we'll come back and we'll tie that back in a few minutes here. But let's jump in and talk about purpose. It's a very, very simple model here with what on the outside, how in the next circle in, and purpose in the center. And the whole idea behind this model is that if we walk up to anybody on the street today and ask them, what do? They can tell you. I mean, we went through the whole introduction process here as part of this meeting, and everyone was saying, who they are, what it is that they do. So everybody knows what they do. Some people know how they do it, but very, very few people really understand the purpose behind why they do what they do. And so what happens is that in our human nature, we have a tendency to work from what we know toward what we don't know. But the trap that we fall into is that we get so absorbed in figuring out how we do what it is that we do that most of us never get to a point of really understanding or digging out the purpose behind what we do. In contrast to that, virtually every stratospherically successful person in business in the world does exactly the opposite. And a good example of that is Apple Computer. Many people didn't like Steve Jobs' approach to how he managed his business, but Steve Jobs was a true visionary who understood the power of beginning with purpose. And if you've ever watched any of his YouTube videos, the presentations that he made at Apple, some of the comments that he would make are, "We challenge the status quo." we don't want to differentiate ourselves from our competition. We want to be completely different. And we innovate in such a way that we anticipate the needs of our customers before they even realize that they have a need. And that was his driving force. And with that in mind, his how became, how do we do that? Our products are very, very innovative. They're very well made, and they're extremely easy to use. It just so happens that our what is, we make computers and computer-related equipment. And the thing that I think it's important to understand is that purpose can be something that's very personal for us, but it also has a different impact corporately. Because those who are looking at what we do, if on the screen now, you'll see a picture of a human brain. And the two things I want to focus in on that are, one is the neocortex and the other is the limbic system. The neocortex of our brain is the analytical part that looks at something like an Apple computer and says, how much memory does it have? What's the screen resolution? How fast is the processor? How much does it cost? That sort of thing. Is it easy to use? That sort of thing. But the limbic system is the emotional part of our brain that looks at things and says, but I like it. It looks pretty. I want it. And sometimes that's a status thing. But the whole purpose of looking at things this way is to realize that when it comes to your purpose and looking outside of you, people buy what you do. They don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. Because there's a resonance there. People resonate with you. And so as you begin to discover your purpose and as you start working on your purpose, you're going to attract people to you who resonate with that purpose. And that's really, really critical. But there are a couple of other things that play into this equation. One is the law of intentionality, and the other one is the law of awareness. The law of intentionality basically says that when it comes to your purpose, you and you alone are responsible for finding and doing something about your purpose. And the law of awareness simply says you have to know yourself in order to be able to grow yourself. So here's how these things sort of fit together. You have a purpose, and that purpose is something that you're going to realize over your lifetime, and it's going to express itself in different ways depending on where you are in life. So if you're a 20-something just getting out of school and going to work, you may have a purpose for your life, but how you express that purpose is going to be much different than me at my stage of life. I'm 68 years old. I've done all of that other stuff, so my purpose is expressing itself in a different way. But as we work with our purpose, the first thing we have to do is apply the law of awareness to understand what it is that we don't know. What are the gaps between where we are and where we need to be to see the fulfillment of our purpose? And then, using the law of intentionality, we need to accept responsibility for where we are and be willing to be intentional about closing those gaps. And the more we do that, the more we move toward the attainment of our purpose. And then we repeat the process over and over as we discover new gaps and new opportunities to learn and accept responsibility and intentionally work on those things. So that's the concept and the power behind purpose and how it drives, how it helps you to become more fulfilled in what you do. Now let's jump over and talk about the second word. The second word is needs. We all have needs in life, and these are just some of the more important ones. But starting from the center and working our way out, number one, we all have a need to make and spend money. That's just a need in life. And depending on where we are in life, that need may change a little bit. When you first get out of school and you start working at a job, you have survival needs. You need to have a roof over your head, clothes on your back, food on your table, transportation, things like that. And then as your career grows and you make more money, maybe you upgrade. You move from an apartment to a condo or from an apartment to a home. You upgrade your clothes, you upgrade your cars. Hopefully somewhere along the line, if you get married and have children, you start planning for the education of your children and you start planning for retirement. But we all have a need for money. The second thing is that human beings are wired to achieve. And as you probably know from your business relationships, people activate those things at different levels, but we all are wired with a need to achieve. We all have a need for relationships. Relationships are critical for us. And if you don't think that's true, look at what's happened with the suicide rate in our country since the pandemic has happened and we've had the lockdowns and the quarantines. People crave relationships. And we also all have transcendent needs, which are spiritual needs. But the key questions that we have to ask ourselves are things like, how much money is enough? On a sliding scale, when you talk about money, on a sliding scale between Mother Teresa and Jeff Bezos, where do you want to be? And we're all in different places. When it comes to achievement, what does achievement look like for us? Some people are perfectly happy just sort of floating through life, and others are super achievers. When it comes to relationships, what's important to you in relationships? Are you the type of person who has tons and tons of friends and connections? Or are you the type of person that has a few intimate friends and that's all you're really concerned about? And when it comes to the spiritual needs in your life, some people crave a relationship with God. Other people don't think that's important at all. The big question, the $64,000 question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is driving all of those things? What's driving all of those scales? And that gets us into a conversation about our third word, and that's beliefs. Beliefs drive everything. So now we go back to the first model that I showed you about choices, actions, results, and impact. But we're going to add a couple of things on there. We're going to add beliefs, and we're going to add rules. All of us have beliefs. The problem with beliefs is that only about 20% of the beliefs that we have are actually things that we have deliberately chosen to do. So as an example, I'm a Christian. So I've embraced the Christian philosophy and I've deliberately decided to install some of those beliefs in my life. But 80% of the stuff that we believe is stuff that we're not even aware of. And yet it drives and it has a major factor in our lives. And that 80% is stuff that has just been installed as we have lived our lives and as we've had both positive and negative experiences. And what beliefs cause us to do then is to create rules. Now you see this lovely young woman who's wearing a face shield. The reason she's there is that I believe that each one of us has an invisible shield in front of us. And that invisible shield is in between us and the world at large. And so what happens is that everything we communicate to that world goes out through that shield, and everything that comes in from the world comes through that shield. And what we do is we take an invisible magic marker and we write rules on that screen. And rules are usually in the format of if then. If this happens, then this is what I'm going to do. Those are the things, those rules are what ultimately drive the choices that we make, that produce the actions, that produce results and have an impact. So if the results that we're producing are not the results that we want, or the impact that we're making is not what we desire, we don't go back to our choices. We have to go back to our beliefs and say, what belief is driving that? Because when you change the belief, you change the rules and you change everything downstream so that the results that you produce and the impact that you have are different. Let me give you a real stupid example of that. Let's say that I have a belief that all Doberman pinschers are vicious. Now, that may have happened in my life because when I was 5 years old, my next door neighbor had a Doberman and it happened to be a nasty dog, and maybe it barked at me, scared me, snapped at me, maybe it actually bit me, but somehow that belief got installed. Well, then I would write a rule on my screen, something like, if I ever encounter a Doberman, I will run like crazy. I will be like Superman. I will leap tall buildings at a single bound, but I will get away from that dog. So now tonight, my wife and I go for a walk. We're walking up the street, and lo and behold, one of my neighbors has a new dog. The dog's out running around in the front yard, and as I get closer to the dog, I realize the dog is a Doberman. What do? Well, that rule kicks in, and I choose to get away from that dog, and the action I take is I'm hauling butt down the street. Now, it produces a positive result from the standpoint that I got away from the dog. It also produces a negative result and a negative impact because I left my wife standing in the middle of the street, and she's not real happy about that. So you get the sense of how that happens and how beliefs control what it is that we do. So now let's see if we can put this whole thing together into something that makes sense. So when we put it all together, we still have purpose, we have needs, and we have beliefs. But what's really, really important for us is to understand that those three things need to work in concert. There has to be a congruence between our purpose in life, what it is that we believe, and the needs that we have, if we're truly going to be successful and if we're going to live lives that are fulfilled and happy. I'm giving you another example that's sort of a stupid one, but I think it brings the point home, is that let's say that I have a purpose in life. Say I've been gifted with the ability to make lots of money. And so my purpose in life is to make money so that I can be philanthropic. I can give money away to charities and to help people. And yet in my belief system, I have a belief that says money is the root of all evil. And people are just selfish. They don't really need help. What's the chances that I'm going to be able to achieve that purpose? Pretty small, because I'm going to be constantly butting heads with myself until I realize that that belief needs to change. And so that's the whole concept behind the power of purpose. And I can sum it up in one slide that says we have three circles. We have purpose, we have needs, we have beliefs. And the intersection of those three things is where we build a successful life. One of the greatest examples I can give of this whole model and the whole thing behind purpose is my oldest daughter. My oldest daughter, Alexandra, is a doctor. She's a neonatologist, which means that she takes care of children who are born severely prematurely. When she was in medical school, her third year of medical school, she had to make a decision about what she was going to do with her medical career. And one evening she came home from school and she was sitting with me and her mother having dinner. And she announced to us that she was going to go into pediatrics. And we've always encouraged our children to follow their passions, do whatever they wanted to do in life. But I was talking with Alexandra afterwards and I said, well, pediatrics is a tough field because a lot of times you're dealing with little babies and they can't tell you what's wrong. So the diagnostic part of it is really, really challenging. And she said, yeah, I know that, but I can handle that. And I said, well, and the other thing is too, is that, you're always going to make a good living as a doctor, but pediatricians are kind of on the low end of the pay scale for physicians. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, Dad, it's not about the money. This is what I've been called to do. And so she went on, she moved to New York City and attended Columbia University Medical Center for her residency. While she was there, she was doing a rotation through the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU. And at 2 o'clock one morning, she was there, and a fellow named David Rubenstein, who was the head physician of the NICU at Columbia, was there that night. And she said he came over to me as I was attending to a 24-week little boy, put his arm around my shoulder and whispered in my ear, "This is what God has called you to do." So she went on, did a fellowship in neonatology, and she now works in the neonatal unit at Tufts Medical Center in Boston. And after she'd been practicing medicine for about 3 years, I sat with her and I said, "So tell me about your patients." And she looked at me and she said, "Dad, they're not my patients. They're my babies. And I love each and every one of them." And then she followed on and she said, "If it ever reaches a point where these little ones are just another patient to be taken care of, it's time for me to quit because I've lost my edge and I can't give them 1,000% of the care that they deserve." And when I thought about that and I thought about the whole purpose, what she did in essence was communicated to me her purpose in life. And I sat back and I asked myself, if you were the parent of a severely premature little baby, who would you want for your doctor? Someone who's there for the money, or someone who says, "This is my purpose in life. This is what I have been called to do." And that, for me, is the essence of what happens to us when we find the purpose, because the purpose fuels the passion that really drives us into the future.